Ever wondered if someone could actually sail around the entire globe all by themselves? Or sneak into a city? No foreigner was allowed to enter, just to see it. Could a woman in the 1800s really ride a horse through treacherous mountains alone for months? What if you spent nearly 30 years just wandering the known world, covering more ground than anyone before him? These are not movie plots. These are real stories from real people who wrote it all down for us to read. Get ready to dive into some of the most incredible solo adventures ever documented. Number 7. The Spy Who Prayed in Mecca, Richard Francis Burton's Arabian Gamble. Richard Francis Burton was not your average 19th century Englishman. Born in 1821, he was a man of extraordinary talents and even more extraordinary appetites. He was a linguist, fluent in dozens of languages and dialects. He was an explorer, a writer, a soldier, a diplomat, a fencer, and an ethnographer. But perhaps his most audacious adventure was his pilgrimage to the holy cities of Mecca and Medina, places strictly forbidden to non-Muslims. Discovery meant almost certain death. He detailed this perilous journey in his book, Personal Narrative of a Pilgrimage to Al-Madinah and Meccah, published in 3 volumes, starting in 1855. Burton's fascination with Eastern cultures was profound. He had served with the army in India, where he immersed himself in local customs and languages, sometimes to the discomfort of his superiors. His desire to visit Mecca was not just for adventure, it was a deep, scholarly, and personal quest to understand Islam from the inside. He believed that to truly comprehend a culture, one had to live it. So, in April 1853, Burton, then 32 years old, began his transformation. He stained his skin with walnut juice and henna, perfected his Persian and Arabic accents, and even underwent circumcision to pass any potential physical inspection. He adopted the persona of a Persian Mirza Abdullah, a wandering dervish or doctor. This disguise was meticulously crafted, down to the way he walked, ate, and prayed. He set sail from England, not directly to Arabia, but to Egypt. In Cairo, he spent weeks living in an Arab quarter, further honing his disguise and language skills. He studied Islamic theology and rituals with local scholars, ensuring he could perform every prayer and custom flawlessly. He wrote about the challenges of maintaining his cover, the constant vigilance required. A single slip of the tongue, a mispronounced prayer, or an unfamiliar gesture could expose him. He even carried a small pistol hidden in his robes just in case. From Cairo, he journeyed to Suez, then by ship across the Red Sea to Yanbu, the port of Medina. The sea voyage itself was an ordeal. The ship was overcrowded with pilgrims, the conditions squalid, and the heat intense. Burton, in his disguise, shared their hardships, eating their food, sleeping on the deck, and joining in their prayers. He described the characters he met, the fervent devotion of the pilgrims, and the vibrant, chaotic atmosphere. Upon reaching Yanbu, the real danger began. The journey inland to Medina was across a harsh desert, notorious for Bedouin bandits. Burton joined a caravan for protection. He rode a camel, endured scorching days and freezing nights, and faced the constant threat of attack. He meticulously documented the landscape, the flora, the fauna, and the customs of the Bedouin tribes he encountered. He noted their codes of honor, their raiding habits, and their incredible resilience in the face of such a brutal environment. He suffered from illness, dehydration, and the ever-present stress of potential discovery. After 12 grueling days, the caravan reached Medina. Burton, as Mirza Abdullah, was overcome with emotion, or at least he portrayed it convincingly. He described the city's beauty, the reverence of the pilgrims, and his own complex feelings. He visited the Prophet's mosque, Al-Masjid an-Nabawi, one of the holiest sites in Islam. He detailed its architecture, its rituals, and the throngs of worshippers. He performed all the required prayers and devotions, moving among thousands of true believers undetected. He spent several weeks in Medina, gathering information, making sketches disguised as notes, and absorbing the spiritual atmosphere. His descriptions are rich with ethnographic detail, from the layout of the city to the dress and manners of its inhabitants. The next stage was the journey from Medina to Mecca, another perilous desert trek. This time, the caravan was even larger, as more pilgrims converged for the Hajj. Again, Burton faced heat, thirst, and the threat of bandits. He described a fierce storm that scattered the caravan and the fear that gripped the pilgrims. He also wrote about moments of camaraderie and shared faith even as he maintained his elaborate deception. Finally, in September 1853, he arrived in Mecca. He was one of the first Europeans to enter the Forbidden City and return to tell the tale. He performed the Hajj, the Islamic pilgrimage, which involves a series of complex rituals. He circumambulated the Kaaba, the black cube-shaped building at the center of the Grand Mosque, Al-Masjid al-Haram. He ran between the hills of Safa and Marwa, drank from the Zamzam well, and participated in the stoning of the devil ritual in Mina. His accounts of these ceremonies are incredibly detailed, providing a rare glimpse into the heart of Islamic practice. He conveyed the immense spiritual power of the Hajj, the unity of the Muslim world gathered in one place. During his time in Mecca, he continued to gather information, making mental notes that he would later transcribe. He studied the city's layout, its markets, and its social structure. He faced constant danger. At one point, he was nearly discovered when a young boy questioned his accent, but Burton's quick thinking and deep knowledge of local dialects saved him. He described the intense spiritual fervor, but also the more mundane aspects of life in Mecca, the commerce, the politics, and the social interactions. After completing the Hajj, Burton needed to make his escape. He traveled to the port of Jeddah on the Red Sea, still in disguise. From there, he managed to board a British ship, revealing his true identity only when he was safely on board. His return to England caused a sensation. His book, Personal Narrative of a Pilgrimage to Al-Madinah and Meccah, became an instant bestseller. It was praised for its detailed observations, its adventurous spirit, and its daring exploration of a forbidden world. Burton's achievement was remarkable, not just for the physical courage it required, but for the intellectual and cultural immersion he undertook. He provided the Western world with an unprecedented look at the heart of Islam, at a time when such understanding was rare. His insights into Arab culture and Islamic faith were groundbreaking, even if obtained through deception. The journey had taken him months, covering thousands of miles by sea and land, through some of the most inhospitable terrain on earth, all while living a lie that could have cost him his life at any moment. His detailed notes, taken in secret, filled 19 notebooks. Number 6. The Woman Who Walked to Lhasa, Alexandra David-Néel's Tibetan Quest. Imagine being told a city is off-limits, completely forbidden to foreigners. For Alexandra David-Néel, that was an invitation. Born Louise Eugénie Alexandrine Marie David in France in 1868, she was a scholar, an opera singer, a feminist, a writer, and an explorer. But she is best known for her incredible journey to Lhasa, the capital of Tibet, a place fiercely guarded against outsiders. She reached it in 1924, after years of trying and an arduous trek disguised as a beggar. Her book, My Journey to Lhasa, published in 1927, captivated readers with its tale of daring and endurance. Alexandra's fascination with Asia and esoteric philosophies began early. She traveled extensively in her youth, studying Buddhism and Sanskrit. By the early 1900s, she was living in Sikkim, a Himalayan kingdom, deepening her knowledge of Tibetan Buddhism. She even met the 13th Dalai Lama in 1912. Tibet, however, remained her ultimate goal. The country was politically isolated and closed to foreigners, especially Westerners. This only fueled her determination. Her first attempts to enter Tibet were thwarted. She was expelled from Sikkim by the British authorities in 1916 for crossing the Tibetan border without permission. But Alexandra was not easily deterred. She spent the next several years traveling in Japan, Korea, China, and Mongolia, often with her adopted son, a young Tibetan monk named Afur Yangden. It was with Yangden that she hatched her audacious plan to reach Lhasa. In the early 1920s, Alexandra, then in her 50s, and Yangden began their covert journey. They decided the only way to succeed was to travel in disguise, living off the land and begging for food. Alexandra transformed herself into a poor Tibetan woman, a Nalgirma or female ascetic, and Yangden, her son, a novice monk. She darkened her skin with soot and cocoa, wore ragged clothes, and carried only the barest essentials: a begging bowl, a few cooking pots, and some spare clothes. They spoke Tibetan fluently, which was crucial for their survival. Their journey was a brutal test of physical and mental endurance. They traveled for months, often at night, through treacherous mountain passes, across frozen plateaus, and through remote, unmapped regions of eastern Tibet. They faced extreme cold, with temperatures dropping far below freezing. They endured blizzards, avalanches, and the constant threat of starvation. Alexandra wrote of chewing on leather scraps from their boots to quell hunger pangs. They encountered wild animals, including wolves and bears. They also had to evade bandits and suspicious officials. Any hint that she was a foreigner would have meant immediate arrest and deportation or worse. Alexandra described their daily struggles in vivid detail. They begged for food in villages, often receiving little more than a handful of roasted barley flour, called tampa, which they mixed with tea and butter to make a paste. Sometimes they went for days without food. They slept in caves, abandoned huts, or huddled together for warmth under the open sky. Alexandra, despite her age and the incredible hardships, showed remarkable resilience. She drew on her knowledge of Buddhist meditation techniques to cope with pain, cold, and hunger. She even practiced tumu, a Tibetan breathing technique said to generate internal heat to survive the freezing nights. One of the most dangerous parts of their journey was crossing the high mountain passes, some over 18,000 feet. They battled altitude, sickness, exhaustion, and treacherous ice fields. Alexandra wrote of near-death experiences of Yangden, saving her from falling into a crevasse. They had to be constantly vigilant, avoiding well-traveled routes and official checkpoints. They relied on their wits, their knowledge of local customs, and a good deal of luck. After 8 long months of this grueling trek, in February 1924, Alexandra, David-Néel, and Yangden finally saw the golden roofs of the Potala Palace. They had reached Lhasa. They were starving, ragged, and exhausted, but they had achieved the impossible. For 2 months, Alexandra lived in Lhasa, still disguised as a beggar. She explored the city, visited its famous monasteries, including the Potala and Jokang Temple, and observed the daily life of its inhabitants. She carefully documented everything she saw, risking discovery every time she made a note. She was struck by the city's unique atmosphere, its blend of intense spirituality and worldly activity. Eventually, her identity was discovered. It's not entirely clear how, but word of a foreign woman in Lhasa reached the authorities. However, instead of being harshly punished, she was treated with a degree of curiosity and respect, perhaps due to her evident deep understanding of Tibetan culture and Buddhism. She was eventually asked to leave, but she had achieved her goal. Her return journey was less arduous, as she was now known. She traveled back to India and then to Europe. When My Journey to Lhasa was published, it became an international sensation. Readers were astonished by her courage, her tenacity, and her extraordinary adventure. Alexandra David-Néel became a celebrity. She continued to write and travel for many more years, living to the remarkable age of 100, passing away in 1969. Her journey to Lhasa remains one of the most daring feats of solo exploration, a testament to her indomitable will and her profound connection with the culture she risked her life to experience. She had covered hundreds of miles on foot, in disguise, through some of the world's most forbidding terrain, all for the love of knowledge and adventure. Number 5. A Lady's Life in the Wild West. Isabella Bird's Rocky Mountain Adventure. Isabella Bird was an unlikely adventurer. Born in England in 1831, she suffered from various health problems throughout her life, including a spinal condition. Doctors often prescribed travel as a remedy, and Isabella took their advice to heart, embarking on journeys that would have daunted most men of her era. In 1873, at the age of 41, she found herself in the American West, a journey that would lead to one of her most famous books, A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains, published in 1879. This book, compiled from letters she wrote to her sister, paints a vivid picture of a solo woman's experiences in a wild and often dangerous land. Isabella arrived in Colorado in the autumn. It was not her initial plan to explore the Rockies so extensively, but the clear mountain air and the rugged beauty of the landscape captivated her. She was not a typical Victorian lady. She wore practical and sometimes controversial Hawaiian riding dress, which was a type of trouser far more suitable for horseback riding than conventional women's attire of the time. She was an experienced horsewoman, and her ability to handle a horse was essential for her travels. Her primary mode of transport was a pony named Birdie, and later, a spirited mare. She traveled alone for much of her time in the Rockies, covering over 800 miles on horseback. She ventured into remote areas, staying in rough mining camps, isolated cabins, and sometimes even sleeping outdoors. Her descriptions of the landscape are breathtaking. She wrote of the towering peaks, the vast forests, the clear streams, and the stunning autumn colors. She endured extreme weather from scorching sun to blizzards and freezing temperatures, sometimes all in a short space of time. One of the most memorable parts of her book is her account of her stay in Estes Park, a beautiful high-altitude valley. It was here she met Jim Nugent, also known as Rocky Mountain Jim. He was a complex character, an educated man with a troubled past, living as a recluse and hunter. Isabella was both fascinated and unnerved by him. He was handsome, poetic, and charming, but also prone to violence and heavy drinking. He guided her on an ascent of Long's Peak, one of the highest mountains in Colorado, standing at 14,259 feet. This was an incredibly dangerous undertaking for anyone, let alone a woman of that era who was not an experienced mountaineer. Climb was grueling. Isabella described the treacherous slopes, the sheer drops, and the terrifying exposure. At one point, she was so exhausted and frightened that she felt she could go no further. Jim Nugent, with a mixture of encouragement and force, helped her reach the summit. She wrote, "I had Dostignala, a point from which I could not stir, when Jim, taking off his boots and stockings, worked his way cat-like along a narrow ledge until he was able to give me a hand when he literally dragged me up. The view from the top was, she wrote, indescribable in its grandeur. Her account of this climb is a highlight of the book, showing her determination and courage. Isabella's writings offer fascinating insights into life on the frontier. She described the rough and tumble world of the miners, the cowboys, and the settlers. She noted their hospitality, their resilience, and their often crude manners. She experienced firsthand the hardships of pioneer life, the poor food, the basic living conditions, and the constant struggle against the elements. Yet, she also found a sense of freedom and exhilaration in the wilderness that she had never known in England. She wrote about the delicious feeling of solitude and independence. She was not immune to danger. She had encounters with wild animals, got lost in snowstorms, and faced perilous river crossings. On one occasion, her horse fell with her, and she was lucky to escape serious injury. She also wrote about the lawlessness of some areas and the ever-present threat of violence. Yet, she seems to have taken these challenges in stride, her focus always on the beauty and wonder of her surroundings. Her health, paradoxically, often improved during her travels. The physical exertion and the clean mountain air seemed to agree with her more than the confines of Victorian society. She was a keen observer and a gifted writer. Her letters are filled with detailed descriptions of the flora, fauna, geology, and meteorology of the regions she visited. She also had a sharp eye for human character, and her portraits of the people she met are vivid and engaging. A Lady's Life in the Rocky Mountains was a huge success. Readers were captivated by the image of this intrepid English woman braving the wilds of the American West on her own, challenged conventional notions of what women could and should do. Isabella Bird went on to have many more adventures, traveling to Japan, China, Korea, Morocco, and Persia, among other places. She became one of the most celebrated travelers of her time, and the first woman to be inducted into the Royal Geographical Society in 1892. Her Rocky Mountain sojourn, however, remains a particularly beloved part of her legacy, a testament to her adventurous spirit and her ability to find beauty and meaning in the most rugged of landscapes, all meticulously documented. She spent several months in the region from September 1873 into the winter, experiencing the full force of its changing seasons. Number 4. The Man Who Told Europe About Asia. Marco Polo's Great Journey. Marco Polo. The name itself conjures up images of exotic lands, fabulous wealth, and incredible adventures. Born in Venice around 1254, he was a merchant traveler whose journeys to Asia, and particularly to the court of Kublai Khan in China, became the stuff of legend. His book, The Travels of Marco Polo, also known as Il Milione, or Description of the World, dictated to a writer named Rustichello de Pisa, while Polo was imprisoned in Genoa around 1298, opened up a whole new world to medieval Europeans. While he traveled with his father Niccolo and uncle Maffeo for part of his journey, Marco's keen observations and youthful perspective made the resulting narrative uniquely his, and for vast stretches, especially in service to the Khan, his experiences were his own. Polos were a family of merchants. Niccolo and Maffeo had already traveled to the east before Marco was born, even meeting Kublai Khan. In 1271, when Marco was about 17 years old, he set off with his father and uncle on their second and much more famous journey. Their mission was partly commercial and partly diplomatic, as they carried letters from Pope Gregory X to Kublai Khan. Their journey was epic in scale, taking them 3.5 years to reach the Khan's summer palace at Chengdu, also known as Xanadu. They traveled overland, following parts of what would later be called the Silk Road. Their route took them through Persia, Afghanistan, and across the Pamir Mountains, known as the roof of the world. Marco described the harsh deserts, the towering mountains, and the diverse cultures they encountered. He wrote about the dangers of bandits, the difficulties of travel, and the strange and wonderful sights they saw. For example, he described the deserts of Persia, the old man of the mountain and his assassins, the plains of Afghanistan, and the challenges of crossing the Gobi Desert, a journey that took them a month. In 1275, they finally reached Kublai Khan. The great Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, was the ruler of the vast Mongol Empire, which stretched from Eastern Europe to China. He was a powerful and sophisticated ruler, and he took a particular liking to young Marco Polo. Marco, who was intelligent and observant, quickly learned several languages spoken in the empire, including Mongolian and possibly some Chinese dialects. Kublai Khan employed Marco as a special envoy, sending him on missions to various parts of his empire, including regions that few Europeans or even Chinese had ever visited. These missions allowed Marco to see firsthand the immense diversity and wealth of China under Mongol rule, known as the Yuan dynasty. For about 17 years, from roughly 1275 to 1292, Marco Polo served Kublai Khan. He traveled extensively throughout China, from the northern steppes to the southern cities. He visited Burma, India, and other parts of Southeast Asia on behalf of the Khan. His book is filled with descriptions of the places he visited and the things he saw. He wrote about the great cities of China, such as Cambaluc, modern-day Beijing, the Khan's capital, and Qinsai, modern-day Hangzhou, which he described as the City of Heaven, one of the largest and most magnificent cities in the world at that time. He detailed its canals, bridges, and bustling markets. He described the advanced civilization of China, its use of paper money, an astonishing concept to Europeans, its efficient postal system, its production of silk and porcelain, and its use of coal for fuel. Marco Polo's descriptions were often met with disbelief in Europe. He wrote of black stones that burned coal, of asbestos, which he called salamander's wool because it resisted fire, and of animals like crocodiles, which he described as giant serpents, and rhinoceroses, which he may have mistaken for unicorns. He described the wealth of Kublai Khan's court, the lavish banquets, the hunting expeditions, and the intricate bureaucracy of the empire. He also wrote about the customs and beliefs of the people he encountered, their religions, Buddhism, Nestorian, Christianity, Islam, and various folk beliefs, their marriage customs, and their daily lives. Some of his accounts were so fantastical to his European audience that he earned the nickname Il Milione, meaning the million, possibly because he often used the word millions to describe the wealth and population of the East. However, modern scholarship has confirmed the accuracy of many of his observations. After 17 years in the Khan's service, the Polos wished to return home. Kublai Khan was reluctant to let them go, as he valued Marco's services. However, an opportunity arose when they were asked to escort a Mongol princess, Kokachin, to Persia, where she was to marry Arghun Khan. This journey was made by sea, a long and perilous voyage that took them around the coast of Southeast Asia, across the Indian Ocean to the Persian Gulf. The voyage lasted about 2 years, from 1292 to 1294, and was fraught with danger. Many of their party died from disease or storms. Marco described the wonders and perils of the sea route, including encounters with pirates. They finally reached Persia, delivered the princess, and then continued their journey overland back to Venice, arriving in 1295. They had been away for 24 years. They returned as wealthy men, but they were almost unrecognizable to their relatives, and their stories were so extraordinary that many doubted them. A few years later, around 1298, Marco Polo was captured during a naval battle between Venice and Genoa. It was in a Genoese prison that he met Rustichello de Pisa, a writer of romances. Polo dictated his memoirs to Rustichello, who wrote them down in Old French. The book quickly became famous, copied and translated into many languages. Despite the skepticism, the travels of Marco Polo had a profound impact on European knowledge of the world. It inspired future explorers, including Christopher Columbus, who owned a heavily annotated copy. Marco Polo's detailed accounts provided invaluable geographical and cultural information about Asia, shaping Europe's perception of the East for centuries. He lived until 1324, and even on his deathbed, when urged to retract some of his more unbelievable tales, he reportedly said, "I have not told half of what I saw." Number 3. The greatest traveler you never heard of. Ibn Battuta's 30-year Odyssey. If you think Marco Polo traveled a lot, meet Ibn Battuta. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Battuta, born in Tangier, Morocco in 1304, was an Islamic scholar and traveler who embarked on a journey that spanned nearly 3 decades and covered an estimated 73,000 miles. This was a distance far greater than that covered by Marco Polo or any other known traveler of his time. His travels took him across North Africa, the Middle East, East Africa, Central Asia, India, Southeast Asia, and China. He documented his adventures in a book called the Rihla, which means the journey, dictated to a scholar named Ibn Juzai on his return to Morocco. Ibn Battuta began his travels in 1325 at the age of 21. His initial intention was to make the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, a religious duty for all able-bodied Muslims. He set off alone from Tangier riding a donkey. He wrote, "I set out alone, having neither fellow traveler in whose companionship I might find cheer, nor caravan whose party I might join, but swayed by an overmastering impulse within me and a desire long cherished in my bosom to visit these illustrious sanctuaries." This first leg of his journey across North Africa was fraught with peril. He faced illness, loneliness, and bandits, but he was determined. After completing the Hajj in Mecca, Ibn Battuta found that his thirst for travel and knowledge was far from quenched. Instead of returning home, he decided to explore more of the Islamic world, known as Dar al-Islam. As a trained Islamic legal scholar or qadi, he found that his skills were in demand in many of the places he visited. This often provided him with employment, hospitality, and resources to continue his travels. His journeys over the next 29 years were astounding in their scope. From Mecca, he traveled through Persia, modern-day Iran, and Iraq, visiting cities like Baghdad, Shiraz, and Esfahan. He then sailed down the Red Sea and along the coast of East Africa, reaching as far south as Kilwa, in present-day Tank. He described the wealthy trading cities of the Swahili coast and their Muslim rulers. He then returned to Mecca to perform another Hajj before setting off again, this time northwards. He traveled through Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, which was then controlled by various Turkic emirates. He was impressed by the hospitality he received there. He then crossed the Black Sea to the Crimea, which was part of the territory of the Golden Horde, a Mongol Khanate. He even journeyed with the caravan of Oz Beg Khan's wife, a Byzantine princess, all the way to Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. This visit to a major Christian city was a rare experience for a Muslim traveler of his time, and he provided a fascinating, though sometimes critical, account of it. From the lands of the Golden Horde, Ibn Battuta journeyed eastward across the steppes of Central Asia, through Khwarazm, Transoxiana, and Khorasan, visiting the great Silk Road cities of Bukhara and Samarkand. He was heading for India, drawn by tales of the wealth and generosity of the Sultan of Delhi, Muhammad bin Tughlaq. Crossed the Hindu Kush Mountains, a perilous journey, and arrived in Delhi in 1333. Sultan Muhammad bin Tughlaq was indeed generous, and he appointed Ibn Battuta as a Qadi in Delhi. Ibn Battuta spent about 7 years in India serving the Sultan. He lived a comfortable, even luxurious life, but also witnessed the Sultan's erratic and often cruel behavior. He described the splendor of the Delhi court, but also the famines and rebellions that plagued the land. Eventually, the Sultan appointed Ibn Battuta as his ambassador to the Yuan dynasty court in China. His journey to China was an adventure in itself. The overland route was too dangerous, so he was to travel by sea. His initial voyage from the Indian coast was disastrous. His ship was wrecked in a storm, and he lost all his possessions. Undeterred, he eventually found passage to the Maldive Islands, where he stayed for several months, serving as a chief judge and even marrying into the ruling family. He then continued to Sri Lanka, where he visited Adam's Peak, a sacred mountain. His travels continued through Southeast Asia. He visited Sumatra in present-day Indonesia, which he described as a prosperous Muslim kingdom. Finally, after many detours and mishaps, he reached China. He traveled to the port city of Quanzhou, which he called Zaytun, and possibly as far north as Beijing, Kambalu. His account of China is less detailed than Marco Polo's, and some scholars have questioned the extent of his travels there. However, he provided interesting observations on Chinese customs, crafts, and the efficiency of their administration. Around 1347, Ibn Battuta decided to return home. His journey back was also long and eventful, taking him via Sumatra, India, the Persian Gulf, Syria, and Egypt. He made one final Hajj in Mecca in 1348, during which he witnessed the devastation of the Black Death, the plague that was sweeping across the world. Finally returned to Morocco in 1349, after an absence of 24 years. But his travels were not quite over. He later made a journey to Al-Andalus, Muslim Spain, and another across the Sahara Desert to the West African Empire of Mali. His account of Mali, with its powerful ruler Mansa Suleiman, its gold trade, and its unique Islamic practices, is one of the most valuable historical sources for that region. In 1354, at the request of the Sultan of Morocco, Abu Inan Faris, Ibn Battuta dictated his memoirs to the scholar Ibn Juzai. The resulting book, a gift to those who contemplate the wonders of cities and the marvels of traveling, usually shortened to Rihla, is a treasure trove of information about the medieval world. Provides a unique perspective on the diverse cultures, societies, and political landscapes of the 14th century, all seen through the eyes of one incredibly well-traveled man. Ibn Battuta died in Morocco around 1368 or 1369. His legacy is that of arguably the greatest traveler of the pre-modern era, a man whose curiosity and faith led him to explore nearly the entire known Islamic world and beyond. His travels spanned approximately 44 modern-day countries. He had met at least 60 rulers and a multitude of scholars, Sufis, and ordinary people. Number 2. Around the world in how many days? Nellie Bly's race against time. Could a woman circle the globe faster than a fictional character? That was the challenge Nellie Bly set for herself in 1889. Born Elizabeth Cochran Seaman in 1864 in Pennsylvania, she adopted the pen name Nellie Bly and became a pioneering journalist known for her investigative and undercover work. Her most famous exploit was her attempt to circumnavigate the world in less than 80 days, inspired by Jules Verne's popular novel Around the World in 80 Days. Her resulting book, Around the World in 72 Days, published in 1890, chronicled her thrilling real-life adventure. Nellie Bly worked for Joseph Pulitzer's newspaper, The New York World. She was known for her stunt reporting, where she would immerse herself in a situation to expose it from the inside. She had famously feigned insanity to investigate conditions in a women's lunatic asylum. In 1888, she proposed the idea of a real-life trip around the world to beat Phileas Fogg's fictional record. Her editors were initially hesitant, thinking a man would be better suited for such an arduous journey. But Nellie was persistent. On November 14, 1889, at 9:40, and the 25-year-old Nellie Bly set sail from Hoboken, New Jersey, on the steamship Augusta Victoria, heading east. She traveled light, carrying only a small handbag containing toiletries, changes of underwear, a dressing gown, writing materials, and some money. She wore a sturdy dress, an overcoat, and a distinctive checkered cap. Her journey was a race against the clock, and every delay was a potential disaster. The New York World turned her trip into a massive media event, publishing daily updates on her progress and running a contest for readers to guess her exact return time. Her route was carefully planned to take advantage of existing steamship and railway lines. From New Jersey, she sailed to England. In Southampton, she took a special train to London, then another to Folkestone, and a cross-channel steamer to Calais, France. In Amiens, France, she had an unexpected encounter. Jules Verne himself came to meet her. The author of the book that inspired her journey wished her luck and was reportedly charmed by her determination. From Amiens, she traveled by train to Brindisi in southern Italy, then by steamship through the Suez Canal, stopping briefly in Port Said and Suez in Egypt. She continued across the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean to Colombo in Ceylon. Now, Sri Lanka. She described the sights, sounds, and smells of each new place, often with a focus on the people she met and the customs she observed. She was a keen observer, though her comments sometimes reflected the biases of her era. Her journey continued to Penang and Singapore in the Straits settlements, then part of British Malaya, then to Hong Kong. In each port, she had only a few hours or days before she had to catch her next connection. She faced language barriers, unfamiliar currencies, and the constant pressure of her schedule. She sent dispatches back to the New York World via telegraph whenever possible, keeping her readers informed of her progress. From Hong Kong, she sailed to Yokohama, Japan. She was impressed by Japanese culture, its cleanliness, and its artistry. She bought a monkey in Singapore, which she named McGinty, adding another layer of complication to her travels. Pacific crossing from Yokohama to San Francisco on the steamship Oceanic was the longest leg of her journey. She endured rough seas and the monotony of a long voyage, but she used the time to write and to charm her fellow passengers. Upon arriving in San Francisco on January 21, 1890, she was greeted as a hero. Her journey across the United States was by special train chartered by the New York World. This train blazed across the continent, making few stops, as Nellie was on the final stretch of her race. Crowds gathered at stations along the route to catch a glimpse of the famous journalist. Meanwhile, a rival newspaper, Cosmopolitan, had dispatched its own female journalist, Elizabeth Beisland, to race Nellie Bly, traveling westward. This added another layer of drama to Nellie's journey, though Nellie herself claimed not to be overly concerned by the competition. Nellie Bly arrived back in New York City on January 25, 1890. Her official time, as recorded by the New York World, was 72 days, 6 hours, 11 minutes, and 14 seconds from her departure from Hoboken. She had smashed Phileas Fogg's fictional record and set a new world record for circumnavigation. The city went wild. There was a huge parade in her honor, and she became an international celebrity. Her book, Around the World in 72 Days, was published shortly after her return and became a bestseller. It was a straightforward, engaging account of her journey, filled with her plucky personality and her observations on the world she had so rapidly traversed. She had traveled approximately 24,899 miles, using steamships, trains, rickshaws, horses, and sampans. Nellie Bly's journey was more than just a publicity stunt. It was a demonstration of what a determined woman could achieve in a world largely dominated by men. It highlighted the advancements in transportation and communication that were making the world smaller and more interconnected. She had relied on precise timetables and the efficiency of global networks. Her race captivated the public imagination and made her a symbol of female empowerment and journalistic enterprise. She continued her career as a journalist, covering social issues and later becoming an industrialist, but it was her dash around the globe that cemented her place in history. She had proven that reality could indeed be even more exciting than fiction. Number 1. The man who sailed the world all by himself. Joshua Slocum's epic voyage. Imagine building a boat with your own hands from a derelict hulk, and then sailing it around the world, completely alone. That's what Captain Joshua Slocum did. Born in Nova Scotia, Canada, in 1844, Slocum was a highly experienced, naturalized American sea captain who had sailed some of the finest tall ships of his era. But by the late 1800s, the age of sail was giving way to steam, and captains like Slocum found themselves out of work. In 1892, a friend offered him an old oyster sloop named the Spray, which was rotting in a field near Fairhaven, Massachusetts. Slocum, then nearly 50 years old, decided to rebuild it. It took him 13 months and cost him $553.62 for materials. He meticulously refashioned the 36-foot 9-inch vessel, making her seaworthy once more. On April 24, 1895, Joshua Slocum, at the age of 51, set sail from Boston, Massachusetts, aboard the Spray. His audacious goal: to become the first person to circumnavigate the globe solo. Many thought he was mad. Sailing alone for such a vast distance was considered an impossible feat. Slocum was a master seaman, confident in his abilities and in his little ship. He documented his extraordinary 3-year voyage in his classic book, Sailing Alone Around the World, published in 1900. His first major leg was across the Atlantic Ocean. He made landfall in Hortefeuille in the Azores after 45 days at sea. He then sailed on to Gibraltar. Here he was warned by British naval officers about pirates in the Mediterranean. Deciding that discretion was the better part of valor, Slocum chose to recross the Atlantic and head south, aiming for the Strait of Magellan at the tip of South America. This westward route was unconventional for a circumnavigation. The journey down the coast of South America was challenging. He faced storms, loneliness, and the ever-present demands of single-handed sailing, navigating, steering, cooking, and maintaining the boat. He wrote about his ingenious methods of self-steering the Spray, sometimes lashing the helm so she would hold her course for hours, even days on end, allowing him to rest. He described an encounter with pirates off the coast of Morocco before he turned back west, where he fired his rifle to scare them away. He also famously spread carpet tacks on his deck at night when anchored in dangerous waters to deter barefoot intruders. The passage through the Strait of Magellan was one of the most perilous parts of his voyage. He battled fierce gales known as willywaws, treacherous currents, and freezing weather. He spent several months navigating the treacherous waterways, sometimes anchoring in remote coves to wait out storms or make repairs. He had several encounters with the indigenous Fuegian people, some of which were tents. At one point, he was so exhausted and ill from eating tainted food that he hallucinated that the pilot of Columbus's ship, the Pinta, was steering the spray for him through a storm. He had to use all his skill and courage to make it through. It took him from February to April 1896 to clear the strait and enter the Pacific. The vast Pacific Ocean lay before him. He sailed for 72 days without sighting land, covering 7,000 miles from Juan Fernandez Island, off Chile, to Upolu, Samoa. He described the solitude, the beauty of the ocean, and his daily routines. He fished for food, read books from his small library, and mended his sails. In Samoa, he was warmly received, and even met Fanny Stevenson, the widow of Robert Louis Stevenson, who had written admiringly about the spray. From Samoa, Slocum sailed to Australia, arriving in Sydney in October 1896. He became something of a celebrity there, giving lectures and taking visitors aboard the spray. He spent several months in Australia, sailing up the coast, through the Great Barrier Reef, and then across the Indian Ocean. He called at the Cocos-Keeling Islands, where he was fascinated by the isolated community, and then at Rodrigues and Mauritius. His next major challenge was rounding the Cape of Good Hope in South Africa. This notorious stretch of water lived up to its reputation. He encountered a series of fierce gales that tested both him and the spray to their limits. He spent Christmas 1897 in Durban, South Africa, and was again well received. He met Henry Morton Stanley, the famous explorer, and even President Paul Kruger of the Transvaal Republic, who, upon learning Slocum was sailing around a round world, reportedly told him, "You don't mean round the world, it is impossible. You mean in the world impossible," showing Kruger was a flat earther. After rounding the Cape, Slocum sailed north across the Atlantic, calling at St. Helena and Ascension Island. He faced more storms and the ever-present loneliness, but he was now on the home stretch. He had one final scare when, off the coast of the United States, he was mistaken for a Spanish warship during the Spanish-American War, which had broken out while he was at sea. On June 27, 1898, Joshua Slocum sailed the Spray into Newport, Rhode Island. He had been away for 3 years, 2 months, and 2 days. He had covered more than 46,000 miles. His return was quiet, almost unnoticed at first, as the nation was preoccupied with the war, but his achievement was monumental. He had proven that it was possible for one person to sail around the world alone. His book, Sailing Alone Around the World, became an instant classic. Written in a modest, engaging, and often humorous style, it captivated readers with its tale of adventure, endurance, and self-reliance. Slocum's descriptions of the sea, his encounters with different cultures, and his relationship with his beloved boat, the Spray, made for compelling reading. The book inspired countless sailors and adventurers who followed in his wake. Joshua Slocum continued to sail the Spray for several more years. In November 1909, he set sail from Vineyard Haven, Massachusetts, bound for the West Indies and South America. He and the Spray were never seen again. He was declared legally dead in 1924. His voyage remains one of the greatest feats in maritime history, a testament to human courage and the enduring call of the sea.